Now we'll move on to deputations, and we have a request from Christchurch Stadium Trust, Jim Anderton and Tim Shannahan. Thank you. Welcome.
With Council on a number of occasions, and just recapping very quickly, we're a statutory body set up by the government to administer this stadium until 2017. It was a temporary stadium built for that purpose. We became aware that there was a possibility that the new stadium may not be ready by 2017, and we made both the government and the council aware that if we didn't take steps to upgrade and improve the infrastructure, then the complex would have to close because it wasn't built to last any longer than that. But our engineering reports, which we've provided to council, indicated that the stadium had a longer life, could go to 22, 25 or even beyond, but there would need to be significant in our terms anyway, financial investment in the stadium to enable it to occur. We took engineering advice. We gave that advice to the council, and the reality is that we can go out to 22 and beyond if we make that investment. Now, the stadium runs at a break-even level. We haven't required any further money from the government or the council or anyone else. And we've got significant sponsorship. We've probably got the whole stadium covered in sponsors now. I don't think there's anything left. And we can break even, but we haven't got the funding to invest in improved infrastructure if that's necessary. So that's why the request is before you. On balance, you have to decide. It's your decision as to whether you want a stadium there after 17. And if you do, then some assistance, much of which could be repaid, because the longer the stadium stays in existence, the more reserves the stadium will build up, because with this money we will purchase the rest of the leased seats. We have some of them already, which has saved us about $350,000 a year, but this purchase will save us about $750,000 a year, and that $750,000 would be used to upgrade the stadium so that it could continue. How long it continues is entirely a matter for negotiation between the council and the government. It has nothing to do with the Stadium Trust, actually. We are a statutory body set up by the government to administer what's there now, and insofar as it's there, we will be administering it. But how long it lasts is not our decision, it's yours. There's a set of recommendations which probably, if I just whip through fairly quickly, most of which are relatively unexceptional from our point of view. The proposal to lend the money rather than grant it is not a problem from our purposes, because we intend to hand over the assets of the stadium to the council. In any case, there was a problem with our trust deed in terms of extra funding being handed over, because the deed says it has to be handed over to a charitable trust of the same set of objectives as we have. And with all due respect, I don't think I could count in law the council as a charitable trust or a charity, unless you want to change your status. So we have to work our way through that. But one way is to pay back the money. If we get excess over that, then we have some issues, but that can be dealt with by council negotiation. So the first recommendation is not exceptional from our point of view. I'll just run through them and then you can comment or ask questions if you wish. We have to purchase the seats by December the 20th, I think. That's the drop dead date. We have to pay $650,000 in lease fees for next year if we don't do that. So it'd be a bit of a no-brainer to miss that, because you've already lost $650,000 this year, with more to follow if we don't do the purchase. The trust will generate most of the increased revenue for reserves over time. The first year or two or three, it's a moot point. It depends on the engineering requirements and how quickly this infrastructure can be settled and so on. But most of the money we save will be used in the initial year or two for the infrastructure upgrade. But from then on, the reserves will build up. So whether we pay the money at the end of the term, say to 2022, or we pay some of it over time, is not a great issue for us, because the money is held in trust. It's not our money, so we'll be expensing it in the way that we are committed to do, to pay back the loan or to share it with others. The loan is secured over the assets of the stadium. Of course, it's like your assets, they're not worth much unless you're going to sell the building or whatever. And in a real sense, the assets that are worth something, the land itself you already own, but the stadium has assets which are much more valuable than even the extent of this loan, of course. But what they're worth, it depends on what you're going to do with them, like the corporate boxes and there's light towers and everything else, which you have. And then the seats themselves, if we purchase them, all those seats are actually owned by the stadium, and our intention was to give them to the council. And you could then dispense them to sports bodies or use them in whatever way you wanted. And of course, you'd always have the option of using that stadium as a second-tier stadium, but that's entirely your call. Our obligation is to hand it back, theoretically, as a level playing field. So we have to demolish it, and that demolition actually costs $2.3 million. One of the benefits of this arrangement is that we'll be able to afford that demolition so that you get back a bare piece of ground if that's what you want, and we'll be able to pay for that, plus have enough reserves to fund back most of the loan. The financial projections out to 22 say that we could meet the 60% in the recommendation relatively easily. The longer it goes, of course, theoretically, the more reserves we build up, except that at some point there may have to be more upgrading to a higher standard than we met for the 2022 extension. The engineering reports indicate that, but in truth, I think if you wanted to extend it, you'd want another review, engineering review, probably the year before. Say if I'm not saying this will happen, but if there wasn't a stadium going to be ready in 2022, just say, then you'd need an engineering report that would say, well, in that case you'll need to spend X, Y and Z on this, that and the other, that you wouldn't have had to spend if you're going to wind it up in 22. Same position really as you're in now. But it's quite clear that the longer this goes on, with us owning the assets now, and not having to pay these lease fees, which was a total of about 1.3 million actually a year, then the larger the reserves are over time. The stadium will have assets, as I indicated, and they'll be handed over to the council for your purposes. The Trust's current promotional focus is, and this is in terms of acknowledging your contribution, we have a video that's played on the big screen every game, and we'd be amending that to put the City Council in as one of the people who are one of the organisations that are assisting us. The allocation of the fund money that we pay back to you, to your building and infrastructure allowance, is entirely your business. You can do with it what you like. We're just giving it to you back. And is that it? One more. Oh yes. Well, the question of planning. The consents we have go out to 2016-17. There's a little bit of a gap there, but that's relatively simply closed. But after that, there will be consents required, and we can only say we'll do our best endeavours in that regard, because whether we get the consensus, building consensus and so on or not is up to the process that you set up, and we don't have any say in that. In a sense, we make our submissions, and if we didn't get consent, well, then the building would have to close. That's it. So we can't do much about that, and if that happened, well, all bets are off. But we'll do our best, and we don't anticipate, with discussions we've had, too many problems. We don't seem to have any vexatious or seriously contentious opponents to the stadium at the moment, and we never have, and we've got good relations with our neighbours. The league people, we're in discussions with them. Probably at the end of the day, it may be better for the council to be in discussion with them, but because you own the land ultimately, and the lease that they have is with the council, not with us. But at the moment we have good relations, we're talking to them. We may be able to, I'm relatively certain that we can come to a reasonable arrangement with them for the extension, but their lease has to be renegotiated in 21, I think, isn't it?
2016 and
2016 and then 21, so there's 2 more negotiations to go for them. But they're reasonably positive. They might want a little bit more money or something, I don't know, but we'll work that through, and we're reasonably confident about that. And then, is it the final one? No.
It is, yeah.
It is, right. Given the time frames to avoid the lease payment, delegated authority is desirable, and my advice from officials is that if authority was delegated to deal with the details, our legal advisors and accounting advisors and so on would work with your officials to just tidy up all the details that need to be done to make sure these recommendations are applied properly. So we're comfortable about that arrangement, so that we don't have to have another council meeting or go on, because time is now of the essence, and we will be in serious difficulty if we don't get this arrangement decided by the 20th of December. I think that's all, Leanne.
I just have one question, and it really relates to, some of the, potential for delays in terms of the new stadium, and so the sort of magic around the December 22 date. So say, for example, the stadium couldn't be built by 2022, say it was later than that, would you still be in a position to repay the loan at 31 December 2022? Yes,
we're quite happy to have a 22 date, because in some ways that gives us a definitive time frame to meet your requirements, and we believe on our projections that we can do that. Although we've given projections out to 25 and 28 to the council officials, and those projections show that we are in a better and better position the longer it goes on. You can never be absolutely certain about these things, and as I say, at 2022, if you wanted to extend it out, then that possibility is there from an engineering point of view, but we haven't got a full costing of that, so we couldn't be absolutely certain. We can say for certain now, on all our best information available, we will be able to meet those projections, but after that, it's a bit more guesswork. And I mean, every time you turn around running a stadium like this, there's a drainage problem, or there's a turf problem, or there's something, and another couple of $100,000 goes down the gurgler. I mean, we've been very fortunate to be able to
possibly comment on that.
Well, it's a reality of life, and we're able to cover that cost, and the good news is that the stadium is well used. I mean, the people of Christchurch have been pretty loyal to it. I mean, if you look at the national average for ITM attendances, ours is well up and we never really fill the stadium. Well, we fill it for test matches, and we fill it for the odd, local derby or something. But in the quarterfinals, it wasn't full. So about 14,000, 15,000. It can hold up to 22 for a test match. But the truth is, and we have to recognise this, that the Tier 1 test matches like the Lions games and probably Bledisloe Cup and so on would not be played in that stadium over time. And you can't blame the rugby union for that. I mean, they want to get 45,000 people into the stadium if they can, and we just don't have it. So we have to accept that. The Tier 2 ones, I mean, you know, I won't name the companies, the country that might get into trouble, but there are a number of test matches that could be played here and probably will. And they'll probably fill the stadium. They'll fill our stadium, but they won't fill, we don't have a 40,000 or whatever it is stadium to give to the rugby union. Of course, if they want one like that, they could pay for it themselves, which would be good.
I think on this, 2 points I'd like to make. When the stadium missed out on a test match this year, there was a lot of comment in the media that means Christchurch has a second tier stadium, it can't compete with a lot of other stadiums. What was never reported, and it was disappointing that nobody ever came to the Stadium Trust to ask us, we had a contract with New Zealand Rugby Union that said the stadium was to have a test match in 2015. No test match in 2014, no test match in 2015. World Cup year, there's only 2 test matches in Christchurch, in New Zealand in 2015. We were offered the opportunity to host Crusaders England in 2014, give up our test match in 2014 and be one of only 2 cities to get a test match in 2015. So from our perspective, we made the smart decision to ensure 2 international rugby teams came to Christchurch 2014, 2015. So I think some of that information that was put out there was incorrect. We had actually already done the negotiations. So that probably addresses the aspect in terms of, is the stadium good enough to host test matches? There is other information that needed to be considered. Also going back to the original question in terms of our capacity to repay the loan, yes, we have confidence. However, it's also appropriate to notice that in our financial projections, we're saying 500,000 a year spent on maintenance, decreasing to 200,000 in the last 2 years, because that's when we start to wind things up. If we are pushing past, then you would expect us to stay at around 500,000 for each of those subsequent years until we do know we're winding up and we reduce it. So there is some impact, but we do remain confident.
Yeah.
Our projections are conservative.
I think that was the security that we wanted. But I think, where are we up to with time? Sorry, I can't read the... Yeah. So, thank you very much for your time. I'm not going to deal with this item now because we have another deputation. So.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you.